Hello, I'm Susan Russell, the Global Marketing and Services Manager for Vivit, the independent HP software user community. I want to welcome you to today's webinar titled Take Control of VMware with the Veeam Spy for HP Operations Manager. Today's event is brought to you by Veeam Software, an elite VMware Technology Alliance partner that develops innovative products for virtual infrastructure management and data protection. Veeam's customers reduce costs, minimize risks, and fully realize the promise of virtualization with Veeam. Presenting today is Kevin Simpson. We're glad to have Kevin here with us. He is the Solutions Architect, HP Spy, Worldwide Technical Operations with Veeam. You will also be hearing another voice, which belongs to Marty Lovelace, who will be assisting throughout the presentation. Before we begin, I have just a few housekeeping notes. For those of you who entered into the drawing for a pair of Beats by Dr. Dre Solo headphones, when you registered for the webinar, we will conduct the drawing right after today's event, and we'll contact the winner by email. So watch your inbox. The session is being recorded, and it will be posted on Vivit's website. I will email you a link to the recording once it is available. We will have a Q&A session with Kevin the last 15 minutes of our hour together. If you have a question, you can submit it into the questions pane at any time, and Kevin will answer it after his presentation. So here is a picture of the GoToWebinar control panel that usually appears in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. To submit a question, just make sure that the questions pane is expanded, type in your question, and click Send. I also want to point out one more tool on the control panel. There is a window icon on the Grab tab. Clicking on this will toggle you into full screen view, which makes it easier to see any fine detail that might be presented today. So with that, I am going to pass it over to Kevin, who will be now sharing his screen. So he's getting set up here.
Thank you, Susan.
You're welcome.
Can you see my screen?
Yes, it looks good.
Okay, excellent. Thanks again, Susan. My name is Kevin Simpson. I'm the HP Solutions Architect for Veeam Software. Today, we want to talk to you about taking control of your VMware with the Veeam Smart plugin for HP Operations Manager. As virtualization grows, there becomes many benefits and challenges to this environment. Some of the benefits include consolidating servers, reducing downtime, and gaining flexibility. Some of the challenges that result from this is new infrastructure layers, new management tools, new challenges, and additional costs. Let's pause for a quick poll here.
Okay, do you use HP Operations Manager today, and what version? You want to select your options. We'll wait for all the votes to come in. They're still coming in. Give everybody a few more seconds here. Okay, I'm going to close the poll and share the results.
All right, Kevin, this is Marty. Looks like we have a nice mix here. It looks like about 45% of our attendees here that have responded have version 9.x, 14% have 8x, and about 7% have something other than that, and about a third of them, 34%, do not use HP Operations Manager today.
Interesting.
Okay. We have one more question, I believe.
Okay, this is a second poll. What is your role within your organization? You want Select your option now. We'll allow a few more seconds here. Okay.
Excellent, excellent. Okay. Looks like we have about 15% are VMware admins, 38% are operations admins, and 12% are IT management, and about a third are something else. Very good.
Excellent. Thank you, Marty.
Sure, no problem.
Okay. Solving your challenges. From an operations professional standpoint, some of the problems that you see here, or some of the challenges that you have, is no visibility of the VMware health, no integrated viewpoint, and no common tools. From a virtualization professional standpoint, there's 24/7 monitoring and firefighting, something constantly going on in the environment, having to react to that. There's also some finger pointing going on as far as, whose problem is it? Is it mine? Is it the server team? Is it the virtualization team? Who is it? From a reporting and analysis standpoint, there's just our tools for reporting on the health of this environment, as well as being able to do trend analysis to determine, how you're growing in this environment as well. From an IT management standpoint, missing SLAs, NAC inefficiencies, wasted investments. From most environments, the NAC is the single point of contact for situations that happen in the environment. And if they're inundated with messages coming through that don't necessarily represent a critical issue, then their jobs become a little inefficient. As far as wasted investments, you go out and you buy tools that perhaps don't 100% integrate into the environment or into your framework that you're using. So there's a wasted investment in a solution that just doesn't provide you what you're looking for. The solution is the Veeam Smart plugin for VMware. We help extend the HP Operations Manager monitoring of your virtual infrastructure. We provide deep proactive monitoring and reporting, which helps unify your virtual and physical and application data in one pane of glass. And we help you to leverage your investment in HP Operations Manager. If everybody's used to using one tool, we give you that same look and feel. Broad and deep monitoring. One of the things that we do is we complement the HP Virtualization Spy. It's a very broad offering from HP. It's a high-level monitoring of 5 virtual platforms. The Veeam Smart plugin is just one environment that we monitor, and that is the VMware platform. Okay, I'm going to switch hats here for a second and switch over to our demo system so I can show you the product live. Give me one second here to switch over. Susan, are you seeing my screen okay?
Yes. And if you wouldn't mind speaking a little louder, somebody's just having a little trouble hearing, that'd be great.
No problems.
Thanks, Kevin.
So what I'm showing here is the actual HP Operations Manager console. And from here, I'm starting off with the service view. The most important thing that I like to show here is the fact that within the service map, we can actually show you the virtual infrastructure that we're monitoring here. So as you can see, I'm attached to one virtual center. Here are all the data stores within that virtual center. In addition to that, I can show the various clusters and the hosts that are in the VMs within that cluster. So that's one of the items that we do provide you, is the visibility to see what your virtual infrastructure looks like from the Operations Manager console. So from here, I can go into these clusters, and this is our SE demo lab, so that you understand why things are configured a little bit differently. But one of the things that you can see here is here's one of the hosts that I'm monitoring. I can actually expand this, and I can see the CPUs and the disks that are associated with it. I can change my view so that I can expand this out, and actually we can take a look at the disks that are associated with this particular host, as well as any of the CPUs that are associated with this host. I can also change this view so that I'm looking specifically at any of the messages that have come through on this machine. So from that standpoint, some of the messages that we do see include, let's see, what is this? We've got a disk IOP message. It's telling us that on this particular host that the read and writes total 772 to disk. In addition to that, one of the things that we also take pride in providing you is with the knowledge base for this event. So we give you the probable cause and some of the recommended resolutions that you can use. And in addition to that, we also provide you the URLs to VMware in order to be able to get the specific information on this event. And we don't do this just with one. We do this with all of the different events that we do provide. Here's one on a memory situation. Status of the sensor memory on this host has changed from green to unknown. So it looks like there at one point in time was a problem with the memory sensor. In addition to that, we also have information that comes from the virtual center. In this particular case, the virtual center machine that we're monitoring is a Vsphere 5 box. So if we expand that, this is telling us that we need to correct the license as far as it's being used on this particular machine. So those are just some of the types of messages that we can get. With our product, we provide over 500 different types of policies or events that you can monitor for. In addition to that, we also provide over 160 different metrics, performance metrics, that you can report against. Now, one of the things that I did not mention at this point that I want to briefly go through is our architecture. The way that we gather the information back from the virtual center environment is based on using the Vsphere Api. So in our environment, what we do is we have an enterprise manager, which I'm showing currently right now, and it manages all of the collectors that we would have in our environment. Excuse me. The way the collector boxes are configured is we would have an HP agent installed on that guy, and our collector would talk directly to that HP agent and provide information to the console. The EMS, or the Enterprise Management Server, is responsible for managing all of the collectors in the environment. It's also responsible for configuring the data that we actually want to monitor against. So from the EMS Manager console, we're able to see at a very high level the number of collectors that we're running, the number of licenses that we're currently using, the actual machines that we're connected to, whether that's a virtual center or ESX host. From the Enterprise Manager tab, this is where I can see the collectors that are actually installed in this environment. Today I have 2 collectors, of which it looks as if all of the monitoring is being done on our second collector here. If I want to be able to do load balancing or move environments between these 2 collectors, I can either do a drag and drop, and now this particular cluster is being monitored by this particular collector. If I want to, for example, do load balancing between those two, that happens based on a failover group. And by default, we provide a default monitoring group. And these two collectors, since they are part of that same monitoring group, I can load balance my jobs in between them. So I'll show you how we would do that real quick. And we just press the load balance button, and as you can see, our monitoring jobs have balanced in between the two collectors. In addition to that, I can also determine my monitoring load and how many VMware objects I'm currently monitoring from this single pane of glass. And again, here's more of a breakout of that information based on the collector that we're using. So we can see which VMware server we're connected to, this is the US VTC01, which is our US virtual center machine. Here's the host that it's monitoring, the monitoring load that it's providing on this collector, and the number of objects that we're monitoring for each of those hosts. If I want to restart or stop any of my collector services, I can do that from this single pane of glass. In addition to that, there are additional settings that I can configure here that will tell the Veeam software how to send information to the HP Operations Console. One of the things that I'll show you when we go back to the HP Operations Manager console is that you can set this up so that your messages go to specific nodes. By default, the way that this works is all of the messages will show up in HP Operations Manager based on the collectors that are doing the work. Now, if I want to also configure what information to collect, I can do that as well from the EMS server. And this is where I tell it what my collection interval will be and which VMware objects that I'm collecting. Now, the other thing that we provide you with this tool is the ability to control how often you want to collect this information. So what we do is we provide an interval multiplier. So the example of this would be, if we look at the cluster information that we're gathering, we have a multiplier of 1. So what this says is, I'm going to collect this information every 5 minutes based on the collection interval. Whereas if we go down to the disk space details, this is set to 2. So based on the collection interval, we're going to collect this information every 10 minutes as opposed to every 5 minutes. So you have some flexibility as far as what information or what objects are important to you and how often you want to collect that information. So that's pretty much the Enterprise Manager. Again, this is your one place to go in order to manage all of your collectors. If you want to add in additional machines to monitor, we do that from this panel as well. In addition to that, one of the things that our product has built in is the ability to calculate how many collectors that you're going to need in order to monitor a specific environment. So once you attach to a virtual center machine, as you go through the install process, it will come back and say, well, I know that you've got so many collectors already connected to me, and based on the size of the machine that you just attached to, you need X amount of collectors to monitor this environment. So that's something that we provide to you automatically. And we do have an online calculator at our Veeam website where you can plug in that additional information, and it will come back and tell you, based on our product, how many collectors you need in order to support an environment such as yours. One last thing that I do want to show before I go on to the next screen, and that is, where to go? We have the ability to split large clusters logically. And in the past, what we've run into is we've had customers that have had some pretty large clusters, and our collector couldn't necessarily monitor that environment because the cluster was too big. So what we did is we created an option called cluster splitting, which I've already done. This is why the button here says consolidate cluster. But what it does is it allows you to take any of the clusters that you have that might be relatively large and be able to logically split that between the collectors in the environment. So that's an additional feature that we do have in the product that some of our competitors just don't do or don't have. So that is the one piece that I wanted to show the enterprise manager that typically we would show an architectural slide that would show how this all ties in together, but I just wanted to make sure that based on this webinar that I showed the enterprise manager so that you would know that there is a central place in order to manage all of your collectors before you start seeing the information show up on the HP Operations Manager console. So let's go back to the console for a second here, the HP Management Console. And again, this is a view from the service map of which we can continue to drill into. But what I want to do is show a little bit further as far as how the configuration is set up. One of the things that I had mentioned before was that typically the information that comes in from the collectors would show up underneath the actual collector nodes within HP Operations Manager. So you can see we have a variety of different messages here, of which some of the messages that you will see are based on us managing ourselves. So if we had problems collecting any of the metrics, or if we had problems connecting to any of the machines in the environment, that's something that we would show. If one of the collector services had stopped, or we did a failover for whatever reason, we would also display that message on the console as well. But what I've done here is I've actually configured this environment such that the specific host messages will go into their own folders. And I did select a couple of the virtual machines and configure them such that their specific messages will go into their specific nodes as well. So let's go in and take a look at one of the hosts and see what kind of messages we're getting here. It's a relatively small environment, so the number of messages that we will receive is relatively small. But we've got health status type information, like I showed it before on the memory. In this particular case, here again is the license message that we saw. Let's try a different box to see what else we've got here. Let's see. We had some disk latency issues here. So we had a disk IOP message. And again, we do have the ability to show the basic knowledge base information. So the people in the NAC, here's an opportunity for them to get the information, to see what's actually going on with the message, and to understand what the problem is based on this event. And again, we have Vsphere 5 type messages as well as 4. In this particular case, we've got a message here that, let's see, somebody put in an invalid password, and then also we lost communications with one of our disk mounts, and that information got displayed as well. The other thing that I wanted to just make mention of and just show for a second here is that we do provide a lot of information as far as what's going on in the environment. We do as well provide information as far as changes that have taken place in the environment. So if somebody's running a specific task on the VI client, we'll capture some of that information as well. Any alarms that you have pre-configured on the vSphere side, that information can be passed along as well. So I just wanted to make sure that, in addition to any of the the health-specific type messages that we will produce via the product, any alerts that you have configured on the Vsphere side, those come in as well. So having said that, one of the nice things about the product is that some of the configuration changes or activities that might take place aren't necessarily specific enough or critical enough where those have to be sent to the NOC, for example. But the beauty of that is that you have that configuration information along with the events or the alarms that have taken place in the environment. So when you look at that all together, you're able to tell a story, such as, you can see that CPU usage or CPU ready percents have gone very high. You get the various status alarms that says that the status changes have taken place. And then you might see something like a DRS taking place. So you can actually see a pattern of some events taking place. And then out of that, you can actually glean out what's the critical alert that you need to pass to the NOC. So that's just some of the information, or just some of the ways that you can use the product in order to troubleshoot, what's going on in the environment. In addition to that, we do have reporting capabilities. We do integrate currently today with HP Reporter as well as OVPI. And we do have a container or folder specifically for our own reports. So what I'm going to do is show the cluster inventory report, just to give you a feel for that. And what I like about this report is that it actually gives you an idea, based on the cluster, the resource pools that are there, and the virtual machine status. So I think, when you're trying to go through and figure out what your environment looks like and get an inventory of this information, of your virtual information, this is a good way to do that. It also gives us information as far as what version of VMware they're running, what type of machine model type it is, how many CPUs are in that specific box, and the number of HBAs and NIC cards in that system as well. So this can be a very useful report. In addition to that, from a cluster standpoint, we have a cluster CPU comparison report as well as memory, and I'll show you those real quick. So now you can see, based on the various clusters, how the CPU is being utilized. 1 second here as I try to move something out of the way. I can't move it. I apologize. There we go. So we can actually see the CPU utilization based on the clusters. We can actually see, how the resource pool is being utilized as well. So we can give you some information to let you know how your environment is growing, and to give you some information, so that you can see over time how things is running as well. In addition to that, some of the other reports that we have are based on disk. We can give you, how many disk writes have taken place per host, how much activity has gone on during the week, what some of the most active utilized environments are. So we give you those various reports that you can take a look at. In this particular case, we can see this cluster is named NA. The data storage that are there, the amounts that are provided, how much space is used, total space is available. The disk pressure. So this is another thing that will help you as far as provisioning your environment. How much space you can use for provision, and how much disk pressure is actually being used for those specific data stores. In addition to not only just integrating into HP Reporter, we also provide information from that goes directly into HP OVPM. So we have various graphs that we can display for specific hosts. So if I wanted to see, for example, the guest CPU percentage used for the physical machine, I can just click on that report. I think since everything was pointing at 04, we'll show that specific collector, and we'll produce the report. So what you can see is the percent CPU used by guest on this specific ESX host, and based on the information, the legends that we see down here at the bottom, we're actually showing the usage, CPU usage, based on our VDI environment. So we get some insight as far as how our VDI users are using this specific host. Let's see what else here. We can check out the network information based on the host, either based on kilobytes or per socket, or per packet rather. So let's just show that real quick just so that you can see just an idea as to some of the data and how it appears in the different reports. So again, here we've got our two NIC cards. I'm sorry, we've got our NIC card, and we can tell basically the packets received and the packets transmitted. So we can give you an indication as to how busy your network environment is based on that specific host. Memory, we can also give you that information as well. Let's just take a look at the max memory report here real quick. So we'll show that. Wow. And as you can see, here's the memory being displayed in kilobytes. And again, here are VDI users, and this is their activities. So again, we can show various reports, whether or not they're guest type reports or host reports, based on the different machines that we are actually monitoring in the environment. Very quickly here, what I just wanted to do is show you the policies that we do have for the product. And within the policy group, there is a Spy for VMware. Diverse set of policies here are just basically us monitoring ourselves. So we want to make sure that our product is actually running so that you're getting the events and the data that's necessary in order to manage your environment. In addition to that, we have a set of auto-deploy policies. And these range from monitoring the virtual center machine, services that are coming through based on Windows events, any messages that are coming from our collectors, and any guest state changes, and syslog messages as well. Some of the other monitoring policies, we do have what's called adaptive thresholds type policies. These policies are based on monitoring the cluster, the resource pools, the ESX host, or the virtual machines. And what these do is they're like stair steps. So you set the adaptive policy to be at this certain range, let's say, for example, 80% of CPU. So you'll get a warning message, and that message will be reset if you get a, let's just say, a minor message that goes to 85%. So that minor message would reset the warning message that we got. And if a critical message would occur, then that message would reset the minor message that we had. So that's how our adaptive threshold policies work. In addition to that, those policies are also the policies used in order to bring in the service map that I showed you earlier. So those are the the different types of policies that we have. And again, we take a look at, from a guest standpoint, CPU ready %, CPU used %, any swap rate type information. We go through that as well from the adaptive threshold type settings. And also, we can go in and take a look at the virtual machine itself, make sure that there's a heartbeat for that guy. If not, we'll send out an alert that says something took place, something is wrong. We haven't talked to that guy for a while. CPU ready %, swap weight, disk IOPS, active memory %, swap memory, and snapshot aging. That's another thing that we do provide is in a lot of instances, if your disk space is being held up by someone taking a snapshot. And if after so many days, maybe somebody forgets about it or somebody goes on vacation, but this disk space is still being used. So we'll send out an alert that says, after X amount of days, this snapshot still exists. That way you know that you can go out there and regain this space for future use. So those are the policies that we provide, and that's pretty much the information that we provide over to the operations console. Again, we're bridging the gap between the VMware side and the HP operations management side. So now that you're able to see the various events that are taking place in your environment, you can now actually send out notifications, making sure that the virtual application team are getting the specific informations or events that are taking place, as opposed to the server team getting this information and not necessarily knowing what to do with this information. And again, you're seeing both the virtual infrastructure and the physical infrastructure from a single pane of glass. So that concludes the demo portion of the presentation. Let me switch gears here and go back to the slide deck for a second. We've got a couple more slides to go through, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. Some of the customer successes. Megaphone. Challenges where no centralized monitoring capabilities unable to reliably monitor critical applications, and they couldn't obtain critical VMware infrastructure metrics. The results of using our product was now they can monitor their VMware infrastructure from one console, which is the HP Operations Manager console. They have the ability to provide better service to their customers and faster delivery and resolution of problems. As far as the Veeam Spy is concerned, we have a proven architecture using version 5. We're an agentless technology, meaning that you do not have to deploy agents on your guest or your host in order for our solution to work. Extensive production use, which includes over 700 large-scale deployments worldwide. Certifications, as new releases of Vsphere come out, we certify our Spy with VMware, as well as when new releases of HP Operations Manager comes out, we also certify our product with them as well. Now, I'm going to turn it back over to Susan for questions and answers.
Sure. Thanks, Kevin. I believe Marty has a list of questions that are coming in. And just as a reminder to everybody on the line, if you have some questions for Kevin, just go ahead and enter them into the questions pane, and Kevin will answer them for you.
Sounds great. Thanks, Susan. This is Marty. All right, Kevin, we do have some questions that are coming in, and here's one. Does the Veeam Spy provide data for BSM?
Actually, Marty, that's a very good question. Being that BSM is the direction that a lot of our customers are going into, what we currently do is we provide the data source into that. We currently don't have the content packs or report packs for Service Health Reporter today. We do have a very large customer that is looking at our solution, and we're working with them in order to make sure that our product does satisfy the BSM need in the future.
All right, sounds good. Thank you. All right, another question. How long is data retained for trending analysis?
Another good question. That really depends on your environment. By default, the data the performance metrics that we collect go into a coded data source, which is retained for 5 weeks. However, customers have the ability to configure that data set retention for their specific needs as required.
Okay, sounds good. All right, here's another one. It says, hello, we are using Veeam Spy, and we want to migrate to SHR. Is a content pack planned?
Good question. And that goes back to our very first question regarding support for BSM. Again, your feedback to us is very important in order to move the product to that next level. And we are working with a specific customer today in order to make sure that we can satisfy those needs. And being able to provide a report pack for Service Health Reporter is one of the items on our list. So today we don't do that, but yes, we'll be planning to do that in the future.
All right, thanks, Kevin. Another one, can you monitor at the hardware level?
Absolutely. One of the things that we do with the SPY is we can provide you sensor data, hardware sensor data, based on using SIM-Smash protocols. So we can tell you, whether or not you're having an issue with a power supply, if the temperature in the cabinet is too high, or if some other issues are taking place at a hardware level, yes.
All right, good. All right, here's one from Stacy. What's the difference between the HP Spy and the Veeam Spy?
The difference is, as I alluded to in one of the earlier slides, is the HP Spy can provide you more areas or platforms, virtualization platforms to monitor. The Veeam Spy, we are specifically monitoring VMware. That's what we do, and that's what we do best. Our architectures are a little bit different. How our collector environments or VMA environments set up are a little bit differently as well. One of the things that we do is we calculate that for every collector that we deploy, you can monitor up to 5,000 VMware objects. And I don't think that that's something that HP measures their VMware capabilities against, is the number of objects that you can monitor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that I do recall in the earlier slides, the HP Spy offers very broad monitoring of multiple platforms. However, the Veeam Spy focuses specifically on VMware and goes very, very deep with a lot more metrics and events to monitor. Okay?
Absolutely. Thank you, Marty.
All right. Sure, no problem. All right, another question. How long does it take to get up and running?
Very good question. When we have a customer that's very interested in our product, we'll put together a 3-day proof of concept. And the way that works is the very first day we install the product. We typically start in the morning and we install the product. We go out and grab a bite to eat, come back and actually look at the events that are populating the console and validate that we're actually collecting the performance metrics. The second day, we take more of a deep dive into those events to get an understanding as to what's happening in the environment. We validate the reports more to make sure that we're actually populating the reports and we're seeing data come in as expected. And then the third day is more or less just a little wrap-up as how everything is going, what we've got defined, and making sure that we understand what we do next in that process to make sure that the POC is successful.
Great, great, okay. Here's one from Ron. What is a collector? Separate installable, separate server?
Yes. One of the things that has come up in the past is we have customers that feel as if their solution shouldn't be a part of the environment that they're monitoring. So with our collectors, they can be installed as virtual machines, and they can be installed as a physical machine. And the footprint is typically something like 2 virtual CPUs, 4 to 6 gigabytes of memory, and 15 megabytes of disk space.
Okay, excellent. One from Danny. Do you need to manually input each ESX server if they are not registered in Vcenter?
Say that again.
Do you need to manually input each ESX server if they are not registered in Vcenter?
You have to man. Well, you could, yes. With our solution, you have the ability to monitor.
Discover them.
If they're attached to a virtual center, we automatically discover that information. Meaning that if I'm authenticating against a virtual center machine, if a cluster is updated and a new host is added in, we can automatically discover that host, and we will update the service map and the topology in order to include that new host. We will discover it automatically. That's one thing that you can configure on the collector itself to discover new hosts as they come in. Or you can manually go out and attach to a specific ESX host that you would like to monitor.
Okay, all right. Is the cost for Veeam Spy based on the number of collectors? That's from Stacy again.
No, it is not. The cost of the SPY is based on the same socket count that you would for purchasing VMware. So the licensing is on a per socket basis. The cost of the collectors, I always like to say the cost is free, meaning that there's no cost from Veeam for you adding additional collectors. The only cost incurred there is the cost of spinning up another virtual machine.
Okay. All right. Let's see. I think I know the answer to this one. It's from Bruno. Is there a benchmark study addressing the use of Veeam Spy? And if you don't know the answer to that, Kevin, I'd be happy to try.
Okay, go for it.
All right. Bruno, there is a benchmark study that was done, but it's on an earlier release of Veeam Spy. I believe it was release 5.5. We're at 5.7 now, so it's a little dated. But if you'd like to me to work with you on that, just give me a shout. It's marty.lovelace@veeam.com. Okay? Happy to follow up with you afterwards. Okay, here's one from Rob. What's the overhead use on the product?
Well, the overhead is very minimum. From the EMS manager standpoint, it's pretty much like a set it and forget it. We will go out and pull every 5 minutes and pull in the necessary information that you're looking for. If events do occur, those come in directly to the HP Operations Manager console. But the overhead is minimal.
Okay, excellent. One from Ron. How are virtual server relationships managed with Vmotion? Are they associated to hosts and clusters, or don't really track to where the virtual instance is located?
Yeah, repeat that question for me.
Okay, so it's a long one. How are virtual server relationships managed with Vmotion? That's really the question.
how are they managed with Vmotion? What we do is we keep track of that Vmotion taking place. So, for example, as a host or a guest gets moved, we will actually show, for example, what caused that Vmotion or DRS to take place. For example, if it was based on high utilization of resources such as CPU or memory, we will, number one, show that information or the alerts associated with that information with that host or that guest. We'll show that information first. And we'll keep track of where that guest eventually landed. So we'll see that, we'll get a message that says, you know, we had a problem, and we'll see another message that says this guest is moved from this host to this host. And if there's any restarting of the operating system or anything like that, we'll show that progression as well. And one of the nice things about that is that we've seen this in the past where DRS activities have taken place, and you've expected a machine to move from one box to another, and then in the process of trying to restart that guest, it doesn't happen. So we do capture that Vmotion DRS activity.
Okay. And here's one from Stacy. How does the Veeam Spy integrate with HP Performance Manager? Any report packs needed?
No. We actually provide a canned set of, I think, somewhere around 15 to 25 different graphs that we automatically produce. And the way that happens is we have what's called the Veeam Spy discovery process that runs on the collectors. And as it determines what the hosts are in that environment, then it'll produce the graphs for OVPM. And if it's a Windows type environment, it will automatically take those graphs from the collector and put them into OVPM for you automatically.
Okay. All right. Another one, do I need to purchase services for assistance with deploying?
No, you do not. We do not sell services. The way that our program works is, you know, first we would start out with a proof of concept to make sure that we're providing you the information that you're looking for. Now, once that takes place, then you have a account management team that works with you, which would include a systems engineer. In addition to that, we would assign a customer success manager to the account, which is your single interface to Veeam. Any problems that you run into, you would contact your CSM. They would track any open tickets that you would have. They would work with support and the product management team to make sure that you're getting a quick resolution to the issue. And their main purpose in the job is to make sure that you're actually successful in getting your product deployed in your environment. So if there's a solutions architect that's needed, they would contact me, for example. They would contact support. That would be the only team that you would need in order to deploy the product. No services would be necessary.
All right. Looks like I got just two more here, so if anybody else has any more questions, just type them in here. We're winding down. Does the Veeam Spy monitor disk latency?
Do we monitor for disk latency? Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yes, we do.
All right. Let's see. Does the Spy have the ability to monitor a Linux VM?
Now that is a good question. Somebody stumped me.
All right. Well, we can follow up with you, Stacy, on that one and try to get you more clarification. No problem. All right. One from Bruno. Is there a minimum version of the agent release to use with the Veeam Spy?
Yes, we currently support the HP agent level 8.x and higher. If you're using the new HP Performance Agent, we also support that as well.
Okay. All right, and one more here. Can Veeam Spy feed into a UCMDB?
Yes, we can.
Okay. All right. Well, that's all the questions I see for today. Any others before we turn it back over to Susan? Please go ahead and type them in real quick.
And in the meantime, Kevin, do you mind putting up your last slide with your picture and your email address?
Sure.
In case anybody has any questions, they can contact you directly.
Absolutely.
Okay, I want to thank everybody for attending. If you have any questions, you can contact Kevin directly, and Bruno and Stacy will follow up with you directly with your questions after the event. And for everybody here, the recording will be posted on the Vivid site. You'll receive an email with a link to where the recording is located. And with that, any other questions that came in?
No, no more. Actually, take it back. Here's one.
Okay.
Are the Vmotions tracked in the service maps?
Good question. The way that would happen is if a guest was moved to a different host, again, what we do is we do what's called Veeam Spy Discovery or VM Spy Discovery. And that runs every 30 minutes. So if, let's say, for example, overnight, a guest was Vmotion to a different host, then we would actually pick that change up and change the topology or the service map to reflect that that machine was Vmotion. So yes, we would.
Okay, and then one more. Ron's really got some good questions here. Along with, it's kind of related to Stacy's, along with Linux as a virtual instance, how about Solaris instance?
Yeah, those are two that I would have to
all right.
Follow up on.
Sounds good. So we'll make a note of that. He gives us a smiley face. Thanks, Ron. And also, just wanted to mention, if anybody is interested in having us discuss the Veeam Spy at one of your local chapter meetings, please feel free to give us a shout, and we'll be happy to work with you on that. Okay?
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Kevin and Marty, and I hope thank you all for attending, and have a great day.
Thank you, Susan. Thanks for putting this together for us.
Absolutely.
Thank you.